On June 10th, 2020, Xenoblade Chronicles will celebrate the 10th anniversary of its original Japanese release. Within that decade, it went from being so niche that Nintendo of America didn't even bother localizing it for a couple of years, to such an important game that its remake was saved as the one last thing of a Nintendo Direct. We're living in the best timeline, so let's talk about that trailer. This video is going to come in 3 parts. The first one is just going to be a normal analysis of the trailer, but I'll be leaving out spoilers because some people haven't played the game yet and are going to want to go in blind with this remake. The second one is just going to be going over the spoiler stuff in the trailer I missed out in the first part, and the third part is just going to be other things I expect to see in the remake that aren't obvious in this trailer, as well as a couple of my wants, and that will also be spoilery. So, new players, watch part 1, don't watch the rest. Everyone else, watch the whole thing. Give me the ad revenue. The only music in the trailer is the main theme of the original game, and it appears to be completely unchanged, suggesting that the soundtrack will be the same as the original game, and unfortunately not reorchestrated or anything, although it's still possible that they just haven't finished that, and they're just using the music from the original version. The first 4 shots we see are just straight up landscape porn. I don't think anyone's complaining. This is Xenoblade. This is the series known for this stuff. So we've got the Great Magna Falls and Magna Forest, the Wreckage Beach area of the Fallen Arm, the Latale Shore area of Aerith Sea, and a view down towards the Gower Plain area of Bionis Lake from Ragwell Lake. These shots just seem to be using DevCam and aren't from the actual establishing cutscenes for these areas in the original game, and as such, most of the creatures present there are missing, the large amount of Paguls in Aerith Sea being trimmed down to 1, and there only being 1 bird on Bionis Leg, but it's not like they're going to decrease the amount of wildlife in these areas in a remake. They just took them out for dev purposes, for trailer purposes, or they just hadn't been put in the game yet. Initially, without any comparison points, and especially at the original quality the trailer is in, you might not think this is a huge improvement over the original game so far, but if you look, especially compare the details in the Fallen Arm in the trailer to the original game, and it's such an incredible improvement. The lighting is so much more vibrant looking, textures are obviously better, and there's so much more detail added, and we'll loop back around to that a bit later, but I think it's pretty obvious that this is a ground-up remake, and not just, we're gonna slot in some better textures and character models into the original game. My guess would be that Monolith is reusing the same HD engine they've been using since Xenoblade X, but specifically the Torna version that was developed for that DLC, which I believe had a bit of differences in better lighting, and I think it could render environments in slightly more detail, which would make sense, just use the best tech you got. We then got a couple shots from Shulk's introductory cutscene, first off showing some improved geometry along with the new details in Colony 9, then the new engine in full force as we see a dragonfly that, at first glance, appears real, that reflects light better, the wings are now properly translucent, Shulk's model we'll get back to in a minute, and then what was initially pretty much just a flat texture with a few blades of 2D grass is now a completely modeled, lush-looking green field. And if the rest of the game looks as good as this one shot, I think we can say that this blows even the best-looking scenes in X and 2 out of the water in terms of sheer graphical fidelity. The next shot is from Shulk's dream in Tephra Cave. There's nothing really interesting about this. I think this is more because the line said to him here is nice and good intrigue to have in a teaser trailer to get people who haven't heard much about the game on board with it. It's just, wow, Shulk's model looks better. Wow, even this dream environment looks so much better than it did in the original game. Nothing super interesting here. After that, though, is the really big thing. We get Shulk screaming as he charges the Mechon across the bridge into Colony 9, which is where his first in-battle vision takes place in the game, but instead of showing off that vision, it just cuts to a few other scenes throughout the game. Besides the obvious, yes, the graphics look better, the zoom-out shot is the first indication of other characters. Rhine and Dunban are present in that scene, and you can see them in the background there, but even in the screenshot, which is slightly higher resolution than the trailer, you can't see any detail on them. We'll get a bit more Rhine later on, but Dunban, unfortunately, we can't see any more of him in the trailer. I do also want to sort of comment on how the Mechon look here, because, yes, their models are better, the textures are obviously better, and I really like how the light reflects off the gilded parts of them. There's just something about the black parts that just doesn't look great to me. It does not look like metal at all. But again, my guess is going to be that this is a holiday 2020 release, so they obviously have plenty of time to fix this. And remember how much better Xenoblade 2 looked at release compared to its original trailer. Like, this already looks fantastic for the most part, and it's just going to get better. So remember that anytime you see something that looks kind of weird, the game is probably still in development. We've also, weirdly enough, got 2 treasure chests in the background of this shot. Them being there in and of itself isn't out of the ordinary, because chests was how you got item drops from enemies in the original game, but this is a cutscene and they shouldn't be there. Things like that aren't loaded in cutscenes, so this might just be a developmental weirdness, something that happened because of the way they recorded the footage for the trailer, and again, the game probably won't be coming out for over a year, or cutscenes now happen more organically from the gameplay instead of having a fade to black transition, they just happen, which I feel like would cause some other issues with things, but the fact that there are no item orbs or normal overworld enemies here, just the Mechon in the cutscene, leads me to believe that the chest being there was an accident that they just didn't bother fixing because it wasn't important for a trailer. In the vision flash, we get Shulk's vision of Rein getting killed by the Arachno Queen in Tephra Cave that prompts him to learn Minato's shield, Rein deflecting the Crabble that attacks Shulk in Colony 9, Shulk and Rein gazing out at the Mechonis from the Bionis' knee, Fiora holding the cases for the ether cylinders before the trio heads into Tephra Cave, the Minato in the lab, and Metalface doing a stabby-stabby. That's then what cuts into the title card, but I need to break down some of these scenes, and in order to do that, it's finally time to talk about the new character models. People are of course complaining that these new designs are too anime, or too much like Xenoblade 2, they ruin the characters, Well, first off, too anime, that phrase does not make sense. Like, the original designs were anime. I don't know how people can't get that through their head. It went from anime to slightly different looking anime. It didn't go from anime to more anime, or from not anime to anime. It always was like this. Second off, people are saying they prefer the original models somehow, and, like, I guess if you liked the more washed out color palette, because this remake is very obviously tuning up the colors and making everything a bit brighter. I like it. It looks a bit more realistic to me, honestly. And, like, yeah, the characters aren't supposed to look like realistic humans, but the environments are supposed to be, like, this really fine line between photorealism and really well-drawn anime backgrounds, and I think that this look looks very good for them. So I get if you prefer the old color palette. That one is definitely a fully subjective thing, but it's also extremely obvious that these new character models are trying to be the original character models, but in HD. Like, if Xenoblade 1 came out for the Switch and never came out for the Wii, it would still look like this. They didn't change anything, they just made the models look better. I guess you could say that the better textures makes everyone a bit smooth and baby-faced, and, like, I guess the eyes are slightly bigger and Shulk's head shape might have changed a little bit. His hairstyle is also slightly different, but compare the Xenoblade 1 scenes to the Definitive Edition scenes to his model in Xenoblade 2. It is clearly closer to the original game. It's basically a higher resolution, higher fidelity, higher poly count, whatever you want to say, version of his original model with the lighting engine that was used for 2 and Torna. So if you want to complain that they changed it so it sucks, complain about the lighting engine and not the model. And again, we also got some key art for Shulk and Fiora. It looks so much closer to the ones from the original game than the ones from Xenoblade 2. Other than a bit of Shulk's hair, the main difference is, again, the colors are brighter and more vibrant, so complain about the color palette, not the models, because, oh my god, Xenoblade 1 characters can finally emote! Like, again, look at a comparison between the scenes in the original game and the scenes we've seen so far in the remake. Characters can actually emote with things more than opening their mouths and making weird shapes with them. We've come so far from the eyes and nose are just textures in the original game. Like, look at Fiora actually able to smirk. Look at Shulk being able to half open his mouth looking at the dragonfly in wonder. Look at him get extremely angry as he charges. The models can actually match the voice acting. This is the big thing. Like, you could say, oh, it's just a port, other than the fact that they obviously added new stuff, which we'll talk about later, but they can't just reuse the animations for the original game. The better facial features means that they actually have to go back and animate faces that weren't as animated in the original game. So there is already a bunch more work that they'd have to do beyond just, oh, let's HDify everything. So yeah, there's my little rant on how I prefer the new character models, and I don't really get the arguments beyond the lighting and color palette, but let's actually talk about these scenes that are shown off. Ryan getting stabbed by the Arachno Queen is a bit too blurry and too fast to see anything with, but the next scene, him deflecting the Crabble, is really cool because this is our good shot at Ryan's new design. Again, it's nothing super groundbreaking, it's just an HDification of his original model, but he does appear to have some facial animation and actually be emoting here, which is nice, and the detail on his scrap driver is amazing. Like, the hinge is there, the paint looks like actual paint and stuff. I think that if they got the metal to look so good here, then they're going to be able to fix the Mechon if they consider it an issue. Shulk and Ryan looking out at the Mechonis, again, it's just a classic shot from the original game, reimagined in HD. It looks fantastic. This doesn't really tell us anything because Shulk and Ryan are still using all their default gear. I think there's more grass than there is in that shot in the original game, which makes sense, again, because of the update. Fiora, I already mentioned how amazing her model looks now, and the fact that, like, she could have that little sassy smirk that actually goes along with what her voice acting sounded like. And if you compare this to the scene in the original game, the geometry in the background is improved, there's more grass, the textures are better, the usual stuff. But amazingly, even the ether cylinder canister she's holding, that only show up in the scene, and I think, like, one other a bit later on, even those are a higher quality model than in the original. Like, obviously the textures are better, but I'm pretty sure the polygon count on the straps was improved. Just the attention to detail there. Always something amazing to see. Minato in the lab. This is another big point of contention. People really don't like how the Minato looks here for some reason. It's, again, because it's brighter and I guess doesn't look as grungy metallic as it did, instead of being more like shiny metal instead of, I guess, not painted or something. But, I mean, it looks fine. It fits with the new lighting the remake is bringing altogether. I feel like this scene in general might not be completely done with the lighting because the Minato doesn't exactly match the tanks and things behind it, but again, it matches the way the game looks now, so it doesn't bother me too much. And if you go back to the Shulk and Ryan looking at Mechonis shot, the Minato does appear to be darker there, so this might be from a different build, or the lighting might be a bit screwy, and it looks a bit more like it should, or it did in the original game, in most of the other shots it's shown off in, so I'm not too worried about this. Metal Face, though, looks terrifying, finally. Like, he was already imposing, but, again, better textures, better model quality, the usual stuff. The zoomed out shot, though, the red lines on him are now pulsating, his claws have more lights, his tail thing is better. I think his body armor, like the black parts of his body, look a bit better than the generic Mechon there, so that's nice. And then I love, also you can see the burn marks on his face there, I only just realized that. And I love how they smash cut him stabbing into the new logo. Definitive Edition, like, it's more Helvetica. They're never not going to use Helvetica in a Xenoblade logo, but the potentially interesting part is the feathers around Definitive Edition. Because our next shot, well actually, I forgot, the title screen fades in. Like, about this title screen, obviously it makes everyone who loves the original game emotional. And that's great. And it does look even better. And I can't wait to see the HD version of this title screen, like, in the actual game. But that's not the interesting part. Because, yeah, it shows off how the weather time changes and that's all cool. But then it fades in to Shulk and Melia. And there is so much to unpack in this shot. Because first off, hey look, it's Melia. She's in this game. Obviously, she's going to be in this game, but here's a glimpse of her new model. Second off, this is an area that's not in the original game. This appears to be Bionis Shoulder, a area that was almost completely implemented into the original game. Geometry exists, almost everything is textured, but it lacks enemies, and it's fully explorable if you hack it, but it was cut. It looks like one of the changes this remake is doing is to bring in the Bionis Shoulder area. The interesting thing about it is While it looks just like an up-res Bionis shoulder, certain things have been changed, putting in a floating island and Alchemoth that weren't originally there. In the original version of the game, it was heavily implied that Bionis shoulder was going to be an area that took place in between Frontier Village and Aerith Sea. In the final version of the OG game, you simply took a Nopon teleporter from the top of the tree of Frontier Village, and that teleported you to Aerith Sea. It's likely that the cut Bionis shoulder was originally going to lead organically from the top of Frontier Village, and then just go to the beginning point of Aerith Sea that you get teleported to. Because that weird teleportation is one of the few instances of the world not really flowing together in Xenoblade 1, where you just get transported somewhere instead of just walking straight off into a new area. And yeah, areas do have loading zones, but it's a bit different to walk into the entrance of the next area and then have it load in to, oh, you're getting teleported to the next area and then have it load in. It feels more interconnected. So it's possible that this is just a post-game area, which I'll talk about in the spoiler section, but it's very likely that they're going to implement Bionis Shoulder's role in the original story back to where it was. The only thing potentially debunking that is the fact that, in that case, Alchemoth would have been moved, because it wouldn't make sense with where it shows off in Aerith Sea, but this could be development footage, this could be a bunch of different things, so who knows? The important thing is, this is a big instance of new content, because Bionis Shoulder was bigger than any of the areas that actually made it into the final game, and it looks like it's being preserved almost in full with some potential additions to change it to a post-game story type thing. Then, we've got Shulk and Melia themselves. They're wearing new outfits. These do not show up at all in the original game, so either new armor models have been added for new armor that shows up in this Bionis Shoulder area. Like, a lot of the armor sets were area-specific. Like, there was the Machina set, which was light, jungly looking gear for everyone, and there were armor sets to match certain areas and certain cultures in the game, so it's possible that this is the Bionis Shoulder stuff for Shulk and Melia. So there's new gear that has a new model for Bionis Shoulder. Or it could just be that they're introducing new gear models because a lot of gear was just recolors of other gear, so they might just be adding new models to further differentiate things. After that, Shulk has a version of the Minato on his back that has never been seen before. It's different looking than the Minato shown off in the other scenes in the trailer, which is just the normal Minato, and it doesn't look like any other forms of the Minato seen in game. More about that, and more about my theories in the spoiler trailer section. So, 2020 release date. Nothing else beyond that, not really a big deal. We know it's coming soon. Xenoblade 2 wasn't delayed, so hopefully this one won't be, but I've got two guesses for when it actually releases. The first is early to mid-June, because that would line up with the 10th anniversary I talked about at the beginning of the video, and the second would be the first Friday in December, because, hey, that's when X and 2 released, that just sort of seems to be the Xenoblade thing to do now, but I'm not entirely sure. Before moving on to the spoiler section, though, I want to talk about a few other things I expect to / want to see in this remake of the game that don't involve spoilers. The first is new story scenes. Adam Howden, Shulk's voice actor, heavily teased working on a new game earlier, and I think we can agree that it's probably this one now. Remember, people are saying, oh, this is a new Xenoblade game. I said, no, it's probably not a new Xenoblade game. My things were, it was either a spin-off or a remaster remake of Xenoblade 1 that included more voice acting. So I was still technically right on my prediction there, just saying. So, Bionis Shoulder, even if it's post-game, will probably have new voiced scenes. The other thing they're probably going to do is go back and voice the heart-to-hearts, because they're all great moments of character interaction that explore more things about the characters than you just see in the main story. Xenoblade 2 voiced them to amazing effect, so I could definitely see them going back and just, as a quality of life type thing, putting that back in the original game. I also expect to see a few features that were in Xenoblade 2, just in general, brought back to this, like dual audio, better settings in terms of like music and stuff, and a cutscene viewer, and they might also bring back the music jukebox from the 3DS version because, you know, why not? I also expect to see a few other additions that bring it more in line with what Xenoblade 2 did. So, difficulty. They'll probably bring back the difficulty sliders, change things up a little bit because certain mechanics on the difficulty sliders were only in 2 and not in 1, and there are certain things in 1 that weren't in 2 and all that stuff. So they'll probably have an easy mode, a normal mode, which is just the original game. Bringer of Chaos will probably be renamed Hero Pawn, and then there's also Max Custom Difficulty, which is like the actual hardest way to play the game. All that stuff. Let's see what else. There's probably going to be a challenge mode, something like the Challenge DLC in Xenoblade 2. It will probably involve cameos from characters from other games, so it might even be the Land of Challenge thing, but from Shulk and Fiora's side, probably adding other characters in too, instead of the Xenoblade 2 party side, and that would be a great bit of fan service. And you get to play challenge mode, but using Xenoblade 2 characters with one's mechanic or something like that. I'm not exactly sure how that would be. You could probably also get, like, Easter egg weapons as rewards from that, like a skin for the Minato that looks like Pyra's sword, that sort of thing. Probably give Ryan something like Zeke's sword, that sort of stuff. Just cool things like that. Is that it that's not spoilers? I think that might be it that's not spoilers. So, okay, spoiler analysis time. This will also involve Xenoblade 2 spoilers. So, okay, we're getting a remake of the game that not only improves visuals, adds new content. I think people can already tell where this is going. They're going to put the retcons Xenoblade 2 introduced into the lore into this game. As in, the scene Alvis shows Shulk will be closer to the Xenoblade 2 version of that instead of the Xenoblade 1. So, the Conduit will be there, Galeo will probably be mentioned by name, the other characters will be there, there will probably be a Siren cameo or something. There's probably going to be confirmation of Ontos, that sort of thing. I'd be very surprised if we didn't also get a thing where, oh, Shulk's about to finish the final boss off, somehow we hear a line from Rex about to finish his final boss off, because Xenoblade 2 did the reverse of that, so they're probably going to do something like that and be like, hey, people who played 2 first, there's your Easter egg, yippee-ki-yay. But also, we've got to talk about the Biona shoulder scene, because everything before that didn't give any indication of new content, and I think before then people were just expecting, okay, completely redone visuals, probably some quality of life and other extra goodies. But this cut area was brought back. So the first idea would be, oh, they're just going to put it back in the original place in the story it had in the first draft of the game before it was cut. But Alchemoth being there contradicts with where it's supposed to be on the Bionis, and even clashes with the shot of Alchemoth in Aerith C in this very trailer. So this might actually be a post-game story segment, possibly focusing on Melia since she's here. Why do I say a Melia story? Well, because the Definitive Edition logo, around the words Definitive and Edition, are white feathers, like the ones on a certain bird lady. So my guess would be, if they didn't put Biona's shoulder back in its original place, what they instead did was repurpose the level design they already had to make the main area for a smaller post-game quest. The other thing I think about this is because Alchemoth's in the wrong position, so this could be the new world. The only thing is, it's sort of weird, like, it's heavily implied in the ending of the game that New Colony 9 is the only settlement left and the High Entia are just there, but I guess this would just, oh, let's retcon it where Alchemoth and one of the Seal Islands, I think that is in the distance, made it back too for some reason. They could also just split out the quest for the Seal Islands, like remove one of them from Aerith C and put it on the shoulder. That could be this too. But again, it just doesn't match with what things should look like unless they drastically changed the environments and just didn't get around to fixing Aerith C yet. But the other thing that makes me think this is post-game is Shulk's Minato. Because this is a brand new design. It looks the most like the Minato 1, but it has certain details and things on it that no other version of the sword have ever had. And that's very, very interesting to me, which leads me to believe that this is a brand new replica that was made for him after the end of the original game just to use as a weapon. I kind of doubt that the Minato would just go through more forms than the 3 it already has, but there are a couple explanations for this. First off, I don't 100% remember this exactly, but I think that part of the story of the original Biona shoulder was, on the way to Alchemoth, Shulk got the Minato stolen from him, and wouldn't get it back until later on and would have to use a makeshift weapon. So, there are a couple guesses for this. One is it's a better replica Minato, possibly one he made himself after the events of the game, and he's just using this in this post-game Melia quest that takes place in the New World. The other option is that the Monopon, not to be confused with Monolith Soft's mascot, which was a joke weapon for Ricky in the original game that was only dropped by Banna after doing that giant quest chain. So it could be, oh, this is a Napon-made replica Minato, probably one that can't use Minato arts, like you're stuck with Turn Strike. Bring back Turn Strike. That's all I wanted at this remake. Let you use Turn Strike more often. Yeah, clearly the important thing. And he uses that until he gets the Minato back, or it's a post-game weapon. I kind of am leaning a bit on the post-game side. Like, they went from Melia feathers in the logo to Shulk and Melia in Bionis shoulder, but with Alchemoth there, to Shulk with a new Minato. So I'm going to guess that he made a replica Minato for himself after the end of the game, and it looks like that for whatever reason. Also, I can't tell if Melia even has a weapon in this screenshot. I think she does, but it might just be blending in with her outfit. Oh no, she has a staff. I don't know if that's a design that already exists or a new one. But regardless, these new outfits. Another thing about this, these could be their post-game outfits, just straight up. As in the ending cutscene, instead of seeing them back in their default clothes, we'll see them in these outfits, and that this post-game story will have those as their default. Because why not? Other potential things that could be added in, fashion gear from X would be a great addition. Just straight up, let me not have characters in really stupid outfits, or like, if say the Machina top is better, but the heavy armor gear is better for a certain time in game, like, give a character an entire outfit so they're not weird and mismatched. That was one of the best things X did. Also, don't change the combat system too much. I think I've gone on record before as saying that 1 is my least favorite game in the series gameplay-wise. But any way I could see them trying to fix the combat would be taking cues from X or 2, and I can't think of a way to do that without making it worse. Like, yes, I prefer X and 2's combat better, but that's when they were designed from the ground up to be X and 2. If you try to bring in, like, canceling or 2's auto attacks into 1, it's just not going to work properly, and they'd have to completely revamp the gameplay from the ground up. So, quality of life things 2 added, definitely do that. I wouldn't suggest trying to make this game's combat system like 2's. If they can think of ways to make it more interesting or more fun to play, then definitely do that, but I don't want them to try and chase the success they had with 2 with the combat system. But yeah, that's all I got, and in interest of getting the video out on time and not making it stupidly long, I think I'm going to cut things off here. Hey, just kidding. I forgot about 3 very important things, so I'm coming back post-editing with a worse mic to very quickly talk about them. 2 of them are Bionis shoulder related. One of them is just another cool thing that they should totally do in the remake. The first one is the town on Bionis shoulder. This is heavily implied to have been where Colony 6 was originally located, based on a cutscene in the Battle of Sword Valley in the original version of the game. They relocated Colony 6, so them saying Colony 6 in that cutscene doesn't make a lot of sense anymore based on where things are located, but this could either be, if Bionis shoulder is part of the main game, in ruins. Potentially the Colony Mumcar is from that was destroyed, because we know that's his backstory, and that could definitely be used to explore his character a bit more, like give Dunban some more scenes to reflect on him, even before the Metal Face reveal, potentially. Or it could be Colony 3, or just some other colony that happens to be around there. That doesn't really make sense with the lore of no Homs knowing what a High Entia is, so maybe it's just a lost colony or something. Ooh, spooky mysterious stuff, just because it's on the Aerith Sea side of Frontier Village or something. Or, if Bionis shoulder is just repurposed for post-game map, they could just put New Colony 9 where that town was, and there you go, there's your geometry. It probably wouldn't work with the way the ocean is, but I don't know. Those are my thoughts on that. The other thing is, you know that weird pod ride you have to take from outside of Alchemoth to that one part of Machina Forest you couldn't access before because of the bridge being out? And that's how you get to Valak Mountain? Bionis shoulder is probably going to remedy that, where it's just straight up, there's a part of Bionis shoulder that curves into that Frontier Village area, not Machina Forest area, sorry, and instead of taking your weird pod trip, you just go onto a section of Bionis shoulder you weren't on before, and that's how you get there. The bridge could still be out, and that would still all make sense. And the third thing is the short story that was in the art book. that explains, it's basically a character interaction thing of everyone having fun, having supper together, and enjoying each other's company in Colony 9 before heading off for the final battle. But it also sets up Melia knowing about some Hyentia technology, that is, the stuff in Tephra Cave that was found there. And that explains how Fiora got her Ham's body back. So make that into actual cutscenes, act that out. Gameplay-wise, it would probably just be a fetch quest, possibly with like another new boss or something in it, and that would be it. But story-wise, it's definitely an important thing to have if you're going to add stuff to the game. Also, just another random thought, the enemies' levels, if Bionic Shoulder is added to the main story, are probably going to be higher, like level 85 instead of 80 final boss, but that's not a big deal in the long run. Back to old me. When we get more gameplay, like there's probably going to be an E3 showcase of it. It might even get its own direct, probably not, but it's going to get more trailers. Remember, this was just a 40-second trailer. There will be more, and I will have more to talk about it. And I hope you show up for that. So, yeah, like, comment, subscribe. Until next time, this is Luxin signing off. Goodbye. I need to edit this now.